In December 2024, China launched its first Type 76 drone carrier, named the Sichuan, at the Hudong Zonghua shipyard in Shanghai. By late 2025, the 40,000-plus ton vessel began sea trials, and by mid-2026, it is conducting advanced operational trials in the South China Sea. What makes this ship revolutionary is its flight deck, equipped with a full electromagnetic aircraft launch system, or EMALS, and advanced arresting gear. This configuration allows the Sichuan to launch and recover heavier fixed-wing combat drones, something conventional amphibious assault ships, LHD, simply cannot do. The Pentagon is unsettled because the United States currently has no equivalent dedicated drone carrier program on the books. While America experiments with the Lightning carrier concept, packing F-35B onto existing assault ships, and prioritizes the MQ-25 Stingray tanker drone, it remains largely anchored in the manned aviation era. This creates a noticeable capability gap in large-scale unmanned carrier operations that China is now exploiting. At its core, Washington's frustration boils down to a simple truth. America wants China to play America games, not China games. For decades, the U.S. dominated a naval chessboard built around supercarriers, air superiority, and forward basing. Beijing refused that invitation. Instead of building expensive copies of American flat-ops deck, China designed an entirely new class of warship, optimized for drone swarms, cost asymmetry, and industrial speed. That strategic disobedience is exactly why the Sichuan terrifies the Pentagon. The real concern for American planners lies deep inside the Sichuan hangar base, where the ship's true lethal payload is stored. The vessel is optimized to operate a mixed air wing that includes the navalized GJ-21 stealth drone, which is the carrier variant of the famous GJ-11 Sharp Sword. This tailless flying wing platform has an extremely low radar cross-section, reportedly comparable to a small bird or insect, making it very difficult to detect and track. Analysts estimate that the Sichuan can carry a handful of heavy-strike UCAV alongside helicopters and smaller support drones, not necessarily dozens of stealth combat drones, but certainly enough to pose a serious saturation threat against enemy defenses. The combination of stealth, numbers, and low cost is what makes this swarm concept so dangerous. When these drones are launched in coordinated waves via the EMALS catapult, they can easily saturate even the most advanced American Aegis combat systems currently deployed on destroyers and cruisers. A single U.S. Arleigh Burke-class destroyer carries a limited number of vertical launch cells, typically 90 to 96, but not all of them are loaded with surface-to-air interceptors. Waves of cheap, expendable drones costing a fraction of a single interceptor missile could rapidly deplete the ship defensive inventory before the main Chinese fleet even enters the battle. This brutal cost asymmetry, spending millions to shoot down targets that cost thousands to build, is a major headache that keeps U.S. Navy logistics officers awake at night. The Pentagon has spent decades optimizing for high-value, low-quantity platforms, and China has now flipped that equation completely. Unlike manned fighters that are limited to just a few hours in the air before pilot fatigue and fuel force them home, these drones are built for endurance. With a reported combat range of around 1,500 kilometers, a GJ-21 stealth drone boasts an endurance of 6 to 8 hours or more. This extended loiter time creates a critical operational advantage. Drones can simply queue in holding patterns while waiting for deck clearance, something no human pilot could tolerate. The Type 76 therefore does not need the rapid recovery systems of American supercarrier. Instead, it can take its time reorganizing its deck, folding wings, moving aircraft to elevators, refueling without rushing. What appears to be a small hangar on paper can effectively generate a persistent presence over 24 hours, launching repeated waves from a limited inventory. The Pentagon is frustrated, not just because China has EMALS, but because Beijing designed its entire doctrine around endurance, not turnaround speed. The Type 76 fundamentally challenges the core assumption of American naval doctrine, which has long depended on projecting power by sending massive carrier strike groups close to hostile shores. For decades, the U.S. Navy relied on its Nimitz and Ford-class supercarriers, to establish air dominance within striking distance of any adversary. However, China has spent years building a dense anti-access and area denial, or A2AD network that features hypersonic weapons, anti-ship ballistic missiles like the DF-21D and DF-26, and layered coastal defense systems. Operating a $13 billion American supercarrier within 1,000 miles of mainland China has now become a high-risk gamble that no admiral wants to take in a real conflict. This Sichuan offers a clever tactical workaround that flips this dynamic entirely. Instead of sending manned aircraft into the teeth of China A2AD bubble, the drone carrier can act as a mobile, distributed command hub that loiters safely outside the primary danger zone, perhaps 1,000 miles or more from the coast. From that safe distance, it can direct waves of unmanned aircraft deep into contested airspace to hunt mobile missile launchers, jam enemy radar systems, or conduct precision strikes against high-value targets. Because there are no human pilots on board these drones, Beijing can accept high attrition rates without suffering devastating political fallout or losing highly trained aviators. This leaves American commanders facing an agonizing choice: risk irreplaceable pilots and expensive manned aircraft in high-threat zones, or concede temporary air control to disposable silicon and software platforms. Neither option is particularly attractive, and that dilemma is exactly what makes the Type 076 such a revolutionary weapon system. Beyond the immediate technological surprise, the American defense establishment is deeply alarmed by China's staggering industrial tempo and shipbuilding capacity. Open-source estimates place the cost of a single Type 076 at roughly $2 to $3 billion per hull, which is about one-fifth the price tag of a U.S. Gerald R. Ford-class supercarrier, $13 plus billion and rising. Even more concerning than cost is construction time. China can build and launch a Type 076 in just 2 to 3 years, while the Ford class takes nearly a decade from keel laying to commissioning. This means that for every one American supercarrier, China could potentially field 4 or 5 drone carriers, each capable of projecting unmanned power across the Pacific. While the U.S. Navy struggles with severe labor shortages, maintenance backlogs, and repeated design delays at its single nuclear carrier shipyard in Newport News, China utilizes multiple high-capacity shipyards operating simultaneously. Satellite imagery suggests work is already underway on a second Type 076 hull at the Hudong Zhonghua shipyard, with plans for additional follow-on ships reportedly in progress. This combination of high-technology automation and rapid mass production gives Beijing a powerful asymmetric advantage that Washington is not used to facing. For decades, American strategists assumed that no rival could match U.S. industrial output or technological sophistication. China is now proving that assumption dangerously wrong by merging both high-tech innovation and high-volume manufacturing in ways the Pentagon never anticipated. The Sichuan is not just one ship. It is a rolling advertisement for a new era of naval competition where quantity has a quality all its own. To understand why the Type 076 causes so much anxiety in Washington and across Allied capitals, one only needs to walk through a potential conflict scenario over the Taiwan Strait. If the United States deploys 1 or 2 carrier strike groups to intervene in a Taiwanese crisis, China could position the Sichuan east of the island to project a massive robotic screen across the most likely axes of American advance. The drone carrier would likely launch its GJ-21 stealth drones to conduct suppression of enemy air defenses or SEAD missions, hunting American Aegis radars and destroying land-based missile batteries in the region. Meanwhile, smaller drones could be deployed for persistent surveillance, electronic warfare, or even kamikaze strikes against high-value targets like command centers and logistics hubs. American surface escorts would find themselves in an extraordinarily difficult tactical position. A single Arleigh Burke-class destroyer must split its limited vertical launch cells between offensive land attack missiles like Tomahawks and defensive interceptors like Standard Missiles and ESSM. Facing a continuous swarm of low-observable drones, hypersonic missiles, and land-based ballistic missiles simultaneously, those defensive interceptors would be depleted within minutes. Once the magazines run dry, the destroyers become floating targets for the next wave of Chinese attacks. While the United States is actively developing its own collaborative combat aircraft, or CCA, loyal wingmen, and unmanned systems, these platforms are not expected to be fully carrier operational until the end of this decade. That creates a dangerous temporal gap, a window of several years where China owns a capability that America simply cannot match. In the high-stakes calculus of great power competition, a temporary gap can easily become a permanent shift in the balance of power. The deployment of the Type 076 is not just a headache for Washington. Regional allies across the Indo-Pacific are quietly panicking over their own naval obsolescence. Japan's Izumo-class helicopter destroyers, which were recently upgraded to carry F-35B jump jets at great expense, suddenly look like a legacy solution to a modern problem that requires unmanned thinking. Australia's Canberra-class amphibious ships lack the necessary catapult infrastructure to launch fixed-wing unmanned combat aircraft, leaving them with no good options if a conflict erupts. Even India's manned carrier fleet, which includes the INS Vikramaditya and INS Vikrant, faces immediate vulnerability against persistent, long-range robotic surveillance and strike networks that can loiter for hours or days. Across the Pacific, from Seoul to Manila to Singapore, defense ministries are quietly revising their procurement plans to account for a future dominated by drone carriers rather than traditional flat ops. Nor is this anxiety confined to the Indo-Pacific region. European navies, including the UK Queen Elizabeth-class carriers and France's future Charles de Gaulle replacement, are realizing that China has effectively set a brand new standard for maritime power projection. It will take the Europeans over a decade to replicate even a fraction of the Type 076 unmanned warfare capabilities, assuming they can secure the necessary budgets and political will. The Sichuan has forced a global realization that traditional, carrier-centric naval strategies must evolve immediately, or risk complete irrelevance in a high-intensity conflict. What makes this even more painful for America and its allies is that they cannot simply copy the Chinese design. They must develop their own doctrine and technology stacks from scratch. By the time they catch up, China will already be moving to the next generation of unmanned naval warfare, keeping its strategic competitors perpetually one step behind. America's deep frustration with the Type 076 ultimately boils down to a combination of strategic surprise, systemic vulnerability, and a refusal by China to follow the established rules of naval competition. The Pentagon fully expected Beijing to spend the 2020s copying legacy Western designs, building more Type 055 cruisers, refining carrier operations, and generally playing the same game that America had already mastered. Instead, China completely leapfrogged the United States by pioneering an entirely new category of capital ship, optimized for the drone era. This technological shock is compounded by a massive temporal gap. China's platform is already sailing and conducting advanced trials, while American drone carrier concepts remain largely stuck on drawing boards or in early prototyping phases. The United States Navy remains structurally organized around human pilots, expensive aircraft, and massive budgetary footprints that are difficult to reform quickly. That said, the United States is not standing still or simply accepting defeat. The Pentagon is accelerating several unmanned programs in response, including the MQ-25 Stingray tanker drone, which is expected to reach initial operational capability by 2026, the CCA, Loyal Wingmen, designed to fly alongside manned fighters, and the Ghost Fleet Overlord program for unmanned surface vessels. The U.S. Navy is also investing heavily in next-generation platforms, like the DDG-X destroyer, and ramping up production of advanced missiles such as the SM-6, which can engage both aircraft and ballistic missiles, and ESSM Block 2, designed to counter swarm threats. Shipbuilding reforms and new alliances, AUKUS, enhanced U.S.-Japan ROK trilateral cooperation, are also part of America's long-term response. However, the fundamental question remains whether these efforts will arrive in time and in sufficient quantity to close the gap that the Sichuan has exposed. The coming years will test whether America's traditional advantages, technological edge, alliance networks, and operational experience can offset China's raw speed, industrial capacity, and willingness to take strategic risks. For now, the Sichuan stands as tangible proof that the rules of naval warfare in the Pacific have officially changed. And that is precisely why America is not happy at all.